Lyxe and the Doomed Planet. The original story was written by Iddunow. This is a Lyxe adventure story that takes place while Lyxe is alone, searching for her friend Ryung. Lyxe was all excited to see what sort of world she'd find on the other side of her portal this time, but that excitement was soon snuffed out as she stepped out onto a hellish landscape. Rivers of lava ran through forest and ravines, bubbling up from more volcanoes than seemed possible, each of which spewed out thick black clouds of smoke that darkened the sky and gave it an ominous blood-red tint. As if that weren't enough, meteors were also falling from the sky, and while most of them burned up before hitting the ground, a few managed to make impact, causing sudden earthquakes that amidst the more generalized constant rumbling of the earth. The scene as a whole was nothing short of apocalyptic, and even though she couldn't know for sure whether it was only localized to this part of the planet, she had a sense that she'd find much the same thing wherever she went. If Ryung was here, and Lyxe really hoped she wasn't, then she didn't have much time to find her and bring her back. With that in mind, Lyxe immediately started looking for her friend, calling her name while she stepped through the burning landscape. Not 10 steps from where she started, Lyxe noticed a curious crunch under her foot, one different from that of the various trees she had already stepped on and flattened to the ground. Lifting her foot up, the giant axolotl saw many destroyed buildings and a few which had managed to survive, each of them roughly the size of a toe. When she saw this, her heart skipped a beat, not that she was worried about having hurt anyone, since her bracelet ensured the safety of everyone around her regardless of whether she was aware of them or not, but because now she knew that there were people on this planet who needed rescuing. Hello? Is anyone down there? She called out, reaching down to sift through the rubble and the remaining buildings. She didn't find anyone that way, nor with the scanner on her bracelet. They must have all run off to try and escape the destruction. Where they were, Lyxe didn't know, and the only possible hint was a path leading away from the village. Since she didn't have any leads on where Ryung might be, if she even was on this planet, she figured she might as well follow the path and see where it lead her. If she couldn't find Ryung here, maybe she could at least rescue some of these people. And who knew? If Ryung really was here, maybe the people would have seen her and could say where she was. With that hopeful thought in mind, Lyxe set off along the road, keeping an eye out for any people or settlements she might find on the way. Bartis had seen a lot in his 60 years of life. Famines, wars, natural disasters, plagues, he'd seen it all and survived. But nothing he'd seen before could hold a candle to the cataclysm now taking place. What was the point of it all, he had to wonder. To survive all those lesser disasters only for his life and that of everyone he knew to be snuffed out by a disaster so great that survival was all but impossible. Were the gods so cruel and callous to render all their past struggles meaningless by snuffing them out all the same? It didn't make any sense to him. Then again, the work of the gods never did. If there was one thing he knew for sure about them, it was that what they did for their own inscrutable reasons. He had hoped that with the village's worship and offerings the gods might spare them their wrath. They were good people all, from the children to those even older than himself, and had done nothing he could see that might have angered the gods. But it had all been for naught, and he met the prospect of his death with a bitter resentment to the deities who were allowing this to happen, if not outright causing it. Look at this, he said to his wife, motioning to the fields and granary, all burned down and still slowly smoldering. With this we are finished. Even if the gods let us survive all this destruction, how could we get enough food to feed ourselves? We will starve to death. Oh. If only I'd been quicker to wake up last night, I could at least have helped save some of our harvest. You're too hard on yourself, dear, his wife Eleni said. There was nothing you could have done. The gods decided that our harvest should burn, just like they decided that our deaths must come sooner rather than later. Blast the gods, then. They have no right to do this to us. What did anyone here ever do to deserve it? Maybe a village or two deserves this end, but not all of us. And definitely not this one. Bartis sighed and rubbed his eyes, but turned to Eleni when he felt her hand on his shoulder. The gods also decided we should have a bit longer to live, you know. Things are bleak now, but there's no need to dwell on it. The least we can do is make our final days worth living and face death together when it comes for us. Bardas stared into his wife's eyes. There was fear in them, the same fear he felt, but there was also a strength that he couldn't find in himself. He stood holding her hands and staring into her eyes, silently letting that strength comfort him. After a couple minutes he opened his mouth to speak. But he hadn't gotten so much as a word out when they both felt a sudden tremor. They searched the sky together, thinking it must have been another meteor. There were none, yet still they felt another rumbling follow the first, and another, and another. Not meteors, they decided, nor a volcano, the tremors were too regular for it to be either of those. Besides, the sound that accompanied them was entirely different, and it seemed to be coming from, looking out past the scorched fields. Bardas and Eleni saw through the smoky air the faint outline of something terrible, a giant monster with fierce, glowing eyes and a glowing aura around its tail and what looked like 6 fearsome horns. A monster that was coming right towards them. Husband and wife trembled in each other's arms. Were the volcanoes and meteors not enough that the gods now sent this terrible beast after them? Behind them, the villagers gathered to see what it was, their worried voices reaching Bardas and Eleni and brought them back to their senses. Go, Bardas said to his wife. Leave with the others. Find a safe place. I will face the monster alone, maybe lead it away from you all. Please, this is something I must do, my final act as the village mayor. Eleni looked into her husband's eyes, then nodded even as she started tearing up. All right. I'll go and live for you, if only a few more days. Try to do the same for me if you can, okay? They shared a brief hug, then she was gone, directing all the villagers who hadn't run off yet to follow her. She led them to the edge of the forest and told them to keep going until the monster was gone. As for herself, she found that she couldn't keep the promise she'd given her husband. If he was to die, she would die with him. She hurried back towards the hill she had left him on, but as the monster emerged from the cloud of smoke, she grew scared and hid behind one of the buildings instead. The closer the monster came, the more the earth shook at its steps, until it was shaking so much that Bardas fell to his knees, unable to keep his balance standing up. The creature was beyond enormous, bigger even than it had seemed through the cloud of smoke. It looked perhaps as much as 1,000 times bigger than Bardas himself. Before a being like that he was powerless as a newborn babe, and he braced himself for death or some worse fate as it stepped right up to him. Surprisingly, the creature had a very feminine figure to it. Crouching down, she looked the village over before fixing her eyes on him. Are you the only one here? She asked, letting Bardas catch a glimpse of her monstrous teeth. The sight was so frightening that he had to close his eyes and turn his head down to compose himself. I won't tell you anything, he said with fists clenched. What was that? I didn't hear you, please speak up a bit. I said I won't tell you anything. He repeated. Looking her defiantly in the eyes, the monster sighed. All right, I'll just have to find them myself. Bardas braced for death as a huge hand came towards him, shutting his eyes so that fear wouldn't overwhelm him. But when the monster's fingers closed around him, he found he didn't die, and though he could feel the humid surface of the monster's fingertips pressing against him, he wasn't in pain either. How such a thing could be, he couldn't even begin to guess before he was dropped onto the monster's palm. A palm so massive he felt lost in it. That hand was bigger than his house, no, bigger than a whole row of houses. The creature's fingers alone rose like towers around him. Never before had he felt so tiny, insignificant and helpless as in this moment. And he couldn't explain why he was still alive at all, unless this monster had something bad in store for him. With the man now safely in her hand, Lyxe spoke into her bracelet, telling it to scan the surroundings for heat signatures. A beam shone down from it to the ground below, and she turned around to let it scan the entire area. As she did, she accidentally stepped in the middle of the small village. crushing about half of its buildings underfoot and eliciting a cry of sorrow from the old man. She felt sorry for him, but there were more important things to worry about right then. The buildings would have soon been destroyed anyways. What really mattered was getting people safe. Just then, she noticed someone run out from behind one of the houses that were still intact and heard the old man call the name Eleni. She quickly picked the little person up before she could run too far and dropped her on her hand next to the old man, who ran to embrace the new catch. Then Lyxe's bracelet beeped to let her know it had finished scanning and showed her the nearby heat signatures. Her eyes were immediately drawn to a small group of 50 or so heat signatures somewhere in the forest to her right. And she went after it, soon, looking carefully through the trees to see if she could spot any movement. It seemed these people were hiding very well, though, so she would have to spook them into coming out. Raising her foot high up, she stomped down in the approximate area where the heat signatures had been spotted, then did the same with her other foot, flattening dozens and dozens of trees under her soles. That proved enough to get the people running, and following their tiny forms as they ran through the forest, Lyxe picked them up one by one, dropping them all onto her other hand along with the first two. It took her a few minutes, but eventually she was pretty sure she had all of them, and was able to confirm it by counting the number of heat signatures that had appeared in the scan and the number of people in her hand. "Is everyone all right?" she asked them afterwards. They all remained silent as they huddled together, only the occasional whimpering being audible, until the old man spoke up. "Why are you doing this to us, monster? Why torture us with the weight? Why not just kill us now and be done with it?" "Kill you?" Lyxe exclaimed. "I'm not here to kill you at all. I'm here to save you." "What lies are these, monster?" "Mayor," a young man chimed in, "I think she's telling the truth. Look at her, does her face look like she means us any harm?" "What are you talking about? How can you possibly trust a giant monster like this?" "She's not a monster, Mayor. Can't you see? She's a goddess, here to rescue us." At the young man's words, all the people started murmuring among themselves. "Well, no, that's not exactly right," Lyxe said with a booming voice. "In fact, I'm not a goddess at all. I wish I was, then I'd have the power to stop whitewaters happening to your planet. But I am here to help, you can be sure of that." "Then, if you're not a goddess, then what are you?" "I guess you could say your mayor was right, and that I am a monster, but I'm a nice one," Lyxe said. The little people seemed unsure what to make of that. "Look, I only came to this world looking for my friend. Another giant, a monster like me. If you've seen her, I would really appreciate you letting me know anything you know about where she might be, but after seeing what your world is going through, I decided to do what I can to help. It would make it a lot easier to save more people if you could tell me where they are. Think you can do that for me?" After some discussion, the mayor spoke up again. "All right, monster. I guess we don't really have any choice other than to trust you. If you're looking for more people, there will be another city a few hours in that direction," he said, pointing forward and a little to the right. "Well, a few hours for us, I can't imagine it will take you that long to get there. As for your friend, we've never seen anyone like what you describe, you're the first monster any of us has seen." "Well, if she isn't here, that's probably for the best. Thank you for letting me know, and I promise I'll save as many people as I can before your world dies. In the meantime, I'll keep you in my backpack so I can have my hands free." Lyxe took off her backpack and slung it around, then opened up the main compartment and zipped it back up most of the way, leaving only a small opening to let in light, and put it back on, setting off in the direction the mayor had pointed her in. It took her a few minutes, but eventually she found the city they had talked about. It wasn't a very big one, but then, it was probably about as big as one could get considering the level of technology these people had. Lyxe was so happy to have found it, and she was already waving at its people to try and let them know that she was here to help, But then she saw a brilliant object out of the corner of her eye, a huge asteroid coming right towards the city, one so big it would wipe the whole thing out on impact. Thinking fast, Lyxe raised her arm and readied the laser on her bracelet, setting it to maximum power before shooting it at the asteroid. The laser hit it dead center, causing it to burst apart into many smaller meteors, but while many of them would burn up before they could hit the ground, many bigger chunks still remained and they were still headed right for the city. Working as fast as she could, she blasted one meteor after another, but her aim wasn't perfect and there were too many for her to deal with. While she did minimize the damage they would cause, several of them still ended up crashing into the city, wiping dozens of city blocks off the face of the planet and doubtless killing thousands of people who had been caught in their path. Lyxe felt a tightness in her throat as she ran towards the city, hoping she might be in time to help some of the victims. She stopped at the city's outskirts, near where one of the meteors had fallen, where she saw one of the local people huddled on the ground with two others. She leaned over for a closer look, and saw that it was a woman weeping over two children. "My babies." She sobbed, repeating the phrase over and over as she clutched the unmoving bodies closely. She was such a sorry sight that it sparked a powerful wave of grief in Lyxe. Eyes watering, Lyxe fell to her knees and started weeping beside the woman as she recalled memories she tried so hard to forget. Lyxe's parents lay immobile on the ground, their eyes glazed over and their faces frozen in expressions of fear and disbelief, their lower halves crushed under piles of rubble, and in the sky, huge, menacing ships shooting powerful red beams down to the planet's surface, cutting through its crust like a knife cuts through butter without the slightest regard for the damage they caused. Lyxe's bad memories were interrupted by a small sensation on her right hand. She wiped the tears from her eyes and looked down to see the grieving mother with her hands on her thumb. "Monster," she said. "Please, I beg you. Take my life. Crush me where I stand. Let me be with my babies again." Lyxe moved as if in a dream, lifting her hand over the tiny woman, poised to crush her in one swift movement. There she kept it, unsure what to do, before finally lowering her hand, the woman closed her eyes and prepared to welcome her death. She was surprised when instead of being crushed she was picked up between Lyxe's fingers and brought up to her face, where she was hugged against her cheek. "I'm sorry," Lyxe said crying, "I can't do that. It's not your time to go yet. I'm sure your kids would say the same thing, too. If they were here, they'd want you to live and be happy, not to die just so you can be with them. Just like my parents wanted me to live. I'm really sorry, I wish I could do more for you right now, but I still have to save everyone else." After slipping the woman into her backpack, Lyxe wiped her eyes and turned back to the city, where she began collecting as many people as she could reach, picking them up by the handful while also using her feet to speed things up by stepping on anyone who was running away, and keeping them stuck to her soles. In any other situation, rampaging through the city would have been so much fun and she would have taken the time to enjoy the feeling of the tiny buildings being crushed under her feet and the tiny people struggling against her soul, but there was simply too much at stake for her to take the time to enjoy it. All the same, it did help her take her mind off the tragedy she'd just seen. Each handful of people she picked up, sometimes grabbing bits of buildings along with them, she dropped into her backpack along with the others. Then did the same with the people stuck to her soles. She thought regretfully that it would be getting very cramped in there soon, but there were more important things to worry about. Soon, the city, or what remained of it at least, was safely evacuated, with everyone safely in her backpack. She even did a scan for heat signatures to make sure, and sure enough she had gotten all of them. Lyxe was looking into her backpack to apologize to the people and tell them she was going to take them somewhere safe, when suddenly she noticed something from the corner of her eye. Looking over, she saw a distant spaceship surrounded by a familiar red glow, one which had haunted her dreams since the day her parents died. Wanting to make sure of what she was seeing, Lyxe commanded her bracelet to zoom in on that spaceship. After a moment, the bracelet projected a holographic display showing the ship in great detail, confirming Lyxe's fears. Though the ship's design was a bit changed after all these years, the logo was still the same, the stylized image of a techno-owl. Mayor. She spoke into the backpack. Turns out it's not your gods destroying the planet after all. What do you mean? If it's not them, then who? You see that ship in the sky? Lyxe said, pointing it out for them. It belongs to a group of robots who destroy planets to make it easier for them to mine their minerals. I think they must be using some sort of gravitational technology to destroy your world, just like they destroyed mine. I don't know what half of those things mean, but if they're the ones behind it, can't you do something about it? You're big and strong, surely you can find a way to take down that ship. I've tried before, but I can't. Their defenses are too strong, and even if I manage to destroy that one, there's many more like it out there and I'd never be able to deal with all of them. It's better if I just focus on saving everyone I can. Tell me, what other places can you point me to? None of them, sadly. I've never been outside my own village except to visit this city. I know the names of a few others, but I don't know exactly where they are. I wish I could say. Don't beat yourself up about it, I'll do my best to find them by myself. But if I'm right, then your planet doesn't have much time left. I'm going to have to do something really drastic, but whatever happens, don't be scared, you're all safe as long as you're with me. Putting her backpack back on, Lyxe waited for the ship to depart before ordering her bracelet device to activate giga growth. After a few seconds, the already titanic Lyxe surged even higher up, growing to over 100 times her size. For the tiny people in her backpack, it was as if they had been suddenly thrust into the air. Even as the backpack they were in expanded dramatically, giving them some much-needed space. The dying planet groaned under her immense weight, the ground around her feet cracking up and the surrounding volcanoes spewing new rivers of lava. Lyxe waited for the planet to settle back down a bit, and for herself to adjust to her new size, then set out to rescue as many people as she could. Though her huge height let her scan a great deal of the planet's surface at once and travel great distances in just a few strides, it also made it harder for her to spot cities, and especially villages, as the former were no bigger than the palm of her hands while the latter were usually smaller than her fingertips, and both of them were often hidden under a layer of smoke that floated around her knees. That meant she would have to move slowly, carefully scanning each area for signs of life before moving on to the next one. For that matter, she'd also have to go slow so that her incredible mass wouldn't cause the planet too much stress and speed up its already quite advanced destruction. Even though what she wanted to do was run through the planet grabbing everyone as quickly as possible, she forced herself to keep an even pace. Fortunately, when she did find and reach a village or city, rescuing it was simply a matter of picking it up and putting it into her backpack. Even for a giant monster like her, it was a very strange experience, digging up big masses of land and holding whole cities in her palms, where probably thousands of people lived. People who were now so small that she was no longer able to see them with the naked eye. As she held a town in her hands, she moved her face closer and tried to find people, but try as she might, she was unable to make out the many residents there. What was just a small movement for her was the most frightening thing that had ever happened to the people of the town, even given the fact that their whole planet was dying. To be in the hands of a 20 miles tall monster girl and see her huge face soaring overhead, covering the entire sky, was so beyond imagination that some people just swooned at the sight. Even the calm breathing of the young giantess was like a warm storm wind for the people and was enough to knock countless inhabitants off their feet and send them flying through the air. Lyxe packed the crumbling city in her backpack and was thankful that her bracelet protects all living beings. Otherwise the tiny people would surely all have died from her careless movements. With each scan she made, Lyxe discovered that the towns were all really spread out. Each scan covered an area with a radius of about 100 miles, yet only turned up about 5 villages and 1 town or city. At first she thought that was how it had always been, then she realized that there had been many others. But they had already been destroyed, probably days before she even came to this planet. How many people had died that way, she wondered. If only she'd gotten here sooner she might have been able to save some of them, but there was no point in beating herself up over it. Not when there were still so many people left to rescue. She trudged through the tiny hellscape with her 10-mile-long legs. The people of the villages and towns were terrified and could not understand what they saw as Lyxe's gigantic feet coming closer, with mighty strides. With every step, she compressed great masses of earth beneath her sole and cracked up the ground around her feet. Whole stretches of land have been completely changed just by her presence. Everywhere she left her huge 4-mile-long and hundreds of feet deep footprints. The citizens of a city could only stare up trembling at the unimaginably large giantess and awaited their death. Especially when this powerful being seemed to be looking straight down at them, crouching down and stretching those mile-long arms towards them. Her massive fingers dug deep into the ground at the edges of the city. Everything shook, boomed and roared. People fell to the ground or flew through the air as the city was ripped from the ground and lifted. People had expected to be crushed or eaten, but certainly not to be stuffed into the gigantic monster girl's backpack. It was ironic that they were saved by the most terrifying being they have ever seen. A few hours into her rescue mission, Lyxe was already getting tired. Even though she wasn't doing anything too hard, there was so much smoke in the atmosphere that after so much time she was starting to feel lightheaded. Even then, she wouldn't give up on these people. She forced herself to keep going even through the dizziness, rescuing more and more people. Sometimes the smoke was so thick that she couldn't even make out where the city of village was. When that happened, she just stood in its general location and stepped around in it until she was sure she had gotten everything in that place, then collected the inhabitants from her soul. She couldn't save everyone, sadly. More than once, a city or village ended up getting destroyed by a sudden volcanic eruption or by a rain of meteors while she was busy rescuing another town. Knowing that she had failed to rescue those people made her sad, but she pushed through it all the same. There would be time enough to weep for them once she was done here. In the end it ended up taking her over 2 days to cover the entire planet, working non-stop so she wouldn't risk letting even a single person die if she could avoid it. And once she had confirmed through her bracelet that there was nowhere left for her to scan, she went back to her normal size and opened up a portal, stepping through to her home. She staggered towards the garden, then collapsed in exhaustion, passing out on the spot. The little people in her backpack were unsure at first. But first a few crawled out, then when they signaled to the others, everyone else followed after, stepping out into this gigantic new world where they marveled at the size of everything from the strange plants to the rocks, and even a giant glass tank that held some curious-looking people about the same size as them, the Feringans, from Lyxe's last adventure, who opened up a small door to their home and welcomed in the new arrivals. Though they already missed their homes terribly and felt that this place would take some getting used to. They were all thankful to have been rescued by this curious monster and hoped they could eventually pay her back for saving them. After tending to everyone from his village and making sure they all made it out okay, Bardas turned to the slumbering giant and gave his thanks to her and to his gods for having sent her in their hour of need. The end. The Doomed Planet. The original story was written by Iddunow. Idea and characters by Cormany Media. Subscribe to our channel for more stories and check out our main channel for short films starring the gentle giantess Ryung. Of course we are happy about comments and a thumbs up. And if you want to support our work, have a look at our Patreon page. Thanks for listening.